DeMond Williams is the key to everything for Washington in 2026.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. That gentleman right there, that's Nick Lemkau from Last Word on College Sports. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put that same drive into every detail, wins define the moment, putting in the work that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, for the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, Nick, we've got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers out there on this Tuesday. I texted you and I was like, hey man, let's draft the most important players to Washington's 2026 season. And you said, yes, absolutely. And right before we press record, we agreed that I get the first overall pick, not to hog it. I'm not like that. I'm a gracious host to all you everydayers out there. But no, because we need to talk about DeMond Williams. And I feel like there are a couple key reasons why he's most important. First of all is the obvious. After all the offseason drama, if DeMond really wants to get back into the good graces of Husky fans, winning solves a lot. I think that in and of itself is very important, especially when you've been propped up by Jedd Fisch for so long as the face of the program. And you showed at so many different points as a sophomore how talented you can be. But on top of that, Nick, I did the math over on Huskies Wire, and I'm going to bring it over here. In Washington's 4 losses last season, DeMond Williams threw for a combined total of 645 yards across those 4 games, with 3 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and just a meager 40 rushing yards. He went negative in 2 of those games. Those things, if Washington wants to take that next step forward and get to the college football playoff in 2026, those things would need to change.
Yeah, exactly. And the key to this team, I think the games are still going to be won with offense. There's a lot of holes to fill defensively. You have the defensive line. I know there's some special teams changes, one position to fill on the offensive line, but the offense is still what's going to win these football games. And you need DeMond Williams to perform at that level when they go on the road to play those tough games that, we have not seen them do in the last 2 years under Jedd Fisch. We were talking before about Nebraska. That's a really big spot. All these road games in the Big Ten are really big opportunities, not just because it's a road game, but the travel implications and what we've seen with this team traveling across the country. It's going to be a big deal for DeMond to go across the country and get those wins and play better, like you said.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's one thing where when we talk about the offensive line, that's one of the units that I do feel really comfortable with right now. I think that there are 2 open spots, to be completely honest, along the offensive line, where right guard is one of them, and you spoiled your first pick for me before we press record, so it's going to be a snake draft.
Sorry, did we start? Is that your first official pick?
That is my first official pick,
okay.
Yes, is DeMond Williams. And I know you said that number 1 on your list was the left tackle spot, so I'm going to write that one up for you. And to all you everydayers out there, at the end, leave a comment down below as who you think had the better draft. Who do you think this group is more important to Washington season?
Yes. Yeah, so my board, I started with the left tackle position. I have Kodi Greene in there because Jedd Fisch has said he wants him to come in and start at that spot, which we're used to seeing. We saw that with John Mills last season, very productive at the left guard spot, but left tackle is the one spot that they need to fill. Obviously, they're returning 4 of the 5 starters, and I think that this team has really shown what they can do with those 4 starters. And if they can get that 5th piece to really play at a high level this season, this offensive line can be the best that it's been under Jedd Fisch. And I've written about it and I've talked about it on some different platforms. But when John Mills talked about they're eyeing the Joe Moore Award in that press conference, was it last week?
Yeah.
That really stood out to me as there's a clear goal in mind. And when you're talking about the Joe Moore Award in February, I think that's a big deal. This offensive line is coming together really strong. The group as a whole returned is going to return over 2,500 snaps from last season. And some of the players along the line took big steps from the year prior in their production, specifically Drew Azaparty. So when I look at that left tackle spot, I'm thinking if Kodi Greene can step into that spot and really perform well, this is going to be a complete offensive line. And I think that is the most important thing for this offense, especially when you're replacing a couple pieces at running back. You got some mix up there. and, some players stepping in at receiver. I think that is extremely important to get that offensive line figured out.
No, I love that. And so I want to talk about the other side of it, because when you said left tackle position, I was like, okay, so no matter who does win that job, whether it's Greene or whether it's Kolt Dieterich, when you look at it from the other standpoint of, okay, yeah, let's say Kolt Dieterich does win the job and they split snaps, because there's no way that Cody Greene doesn't play in most likely every game this season from the way that it just seems to want to handle him this year. I feel like it's one of those things where now all of a sudden the depth is back along the offensive line too, because there were a lot of people that were really worried when not just Paki Finau hit the transfer portal, but Zach Henning as well, because those are two guys with starting experience that do leave the program. But now I think this offensive line,
they could play anywhere.
Yeah,
Paki Finau played all over, and Henning showed his ability to play guard a little bit too. So, I mean, those guys could play all over. Those were significant losses. So I see exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely, because that's the same thing where I look at right guard as the other position where, hey, maybe there's going to be some competition between Garrett Hatchett and Champ Talialia. Let's say Champ wins that job, which I think is very possible. All of a sudden, you have a guy who can back up at 3 different spots along the interior of the offensive line in Garrett Hatchett, who's played both guard spots and some center, and a guy in Kolt Dieterich who's taken 300-plus snaps at both left and right tackle. I think all of that is so significant when talking about this position and where the offensive line is going to be moving forward. But I don't want to delay. I know you've got some other fun stuff. So let's get to your second pick.
Yep. Second pick. So third pick overall. My second most important player on this team is transfer Hunter Greene at punter. Punting lost the Wisconsin game last season. I think a lot of people would agree with that. And not to single the punter out, but 4 of those 5 punts from that game didn't even reach Wisconsin territory. So when you talk about field position in an important Big Ten game like that on the road, that's massively important. I think bringing in a punter like Hunter Greene, who has shown, I have a lot of stats here, I can read those off.
Please.
He's able to flip the field very effectively. And so last year, the punter averaged a net of 34.9 yards, which ranked 169th in the country. And that's listing all punters, like quarterbacks included, who do like pooch kicks and that kind of thing. So pretty low on that list. And you look at Hunter Greene coming in, net average of 41.4 yards per punt, which ranked 30th in college football last season, and a gross yardage of 47 yards per punt, which was top 10 nationally. And on top of that, Hunter Greene ranked 4th nationally in punts pinned inside the 20. He had 30 of those last season for San Diego State. That's massively important when you're discussing field position. And what we know with Jedd Fisch is they get into plus territory. It's 4th and short. They're going to go for it because you don't want to kick a 58-yard field goal, but you also don't want to punt it and touch it back and it's a field position change of like 20 yards. So when you have a punter like Hunter Greene come in who's able to pooch punt or add a little bit of hang time to really help the defenders get down and pin the ball inside the 20 like he showed he was able to do last season. That's significant in the Big Ten, flipping field position, not scoring on every drive, but playing field position like I think this team needs to do next season to be successful. That's why Hunter Greene's number 2 on my list.
All you everydayers out there, ladies and gentlemen, that is why Nick Lemkau is on today's show to talk hunting statistics.
Yeah.
I
Hunting
couldn't agree with you
winning.
more. It is. And that, especially in this conference, that's something that Jedd Fisch talked about a lot. I remember asking him after the Wisconsin game what he learned about that loss. And he spent a lot of time talking about the size and the length that teams had in the middle of the field. And then he very quickly was like, hey, but don't forget, field position is everything in these sorts of games. And obviously with all the injuries and everything that Washington had, that played a factor in depth. And we know how important
there was
that is
a
in the Big
lot.
Ten.
Punting was just a part of that particular Wisconsin game, but there was a lot of injuries.
Oh, there were a lot of issues, but I think your point still is very, very valid when it comes to that was so much of this game. There was so much that came down to if you were able to just get an extra 10 to 15 yards with how that defense was playing, all of a sudden they're not in field goal range. And that's just one of those things where moving forward, those are issues that shouldn't have happened last season, but now that we've seen them and see what that looks like, they cannot happen again. On the other side of the break, we'll get to my second pick. Right after a message from our good friends over at Mazda. This is Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show there's more to the score than what's on screen. And in Washington's win over Minnesota on Saturday, that person was Cortland Muldrew. The box score might look a little bit light. 6 points, 5 rebounds, an assist, a block, and a steal. Certainly got a little bit of everything in there. But Cortland Muldrew's defensive intensity and energy was something that this team absolutely needed in that game. Zoom Diallo talked about it after the game, saying that's the Cortland we want. That's the guy we need because he can just be such a spark plug off the bench, the former 4-star recruit. I love what he brings to the table, and I think that he's going to be a key piece for the Husky basketball team down the stretch. These remind us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. Mazda puts that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel has given you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board, thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. And now, not only can you pick cash, but it can also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future to get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Nick, I'm glad we had that break right when we did, because I am really struggling as to what my second pick was going to be. I know where I want it to come from, and I'm kind of talking this out live because there are three players that I wanted to have. I wanted to be somebody in the middle of the defense where it's, okay, who is this defense really going to revolve around? All the everydayers out there know that the safe pick for me especially would be Alex McLaughlin. However, I'm calling an audible here, and I'm going with Zaydrius Rainey-Sale, because this is something where we heard about it throughout last season as he was recovering from the ACL and everything. It wasn't just what kind of freaky athlete he is, which we saw on the field whenever he was out there in the 7-8 games that he did play last season, but it was the football IQ. It was how well he already understood the defense and how well he could communicate that. Like if he's a green dot guy this year, that's certainly not going to shock me. But on top of just that athleticism at middle linebacker at 6'3" and 225 pounds, he's someone who it's very clear that Ryan Walters wants to utilize all over the formation. And I think that if you're getting that guy where it's not just playing some inside linebacker, they want to line up at outside and rush the quarterback every once in a while. I feel like he is athletic enough that if they're playing a team that wants to split out a tight end and Ryan Walters calls man coverage, that's going to be the guy who's trotting out there to deal with him because he's got the size and the physicality to be able to do that. And I think that the more that I look at this defense, Alex McLaughlin is still going to be the guy that, kind of churns the drink, if you will, where everything is still going to revolve around him. But Zaydrius Rainey-Sale is the kind of guy with a full healthy season that could take this front seven from good to very good and potentially even higher.
Yeah, and you mentioned Alex McLaughlin, and that versatility that he brings to the defense is what's so important. And I think Zaydrius Rainey-Sale brings a similar versatility. He can kind of play anywhere within the middle of that defense. We've seen him drop back into coverage, break up passes, get an interception. He can also get up on the defensive line and create pressure on the edge. That versatile type of linebacker that can play with length, get in those passing lanes, get outside pressure on the quarterback to help, the defensive interior linemen plug holes. It's a very unique kind of player to have in the middle of that defense. And I think, like you said, it's very important for Ryan Walters, who likes to play with length in that linebacker room. I think that he's an excellent candidate to be a top pick in our draft and one of the top players in the defense next season.
Yeah, see, that's why I brought you here. I just wanted you to pump up my picks. There we go. This is what I like to hear.
Yeah.
So with the next one, I was kind of in a similar spot where when I organized this draft board, I was kind of like, okay, I know what positions I kind of want to talk about here, where it's, okay, I needed somebody in the middle of the defense who's going to just help everyone get aligned and clean up with tackles and everything like that. With the next one, it was, okay, I've got a whole bunch of pass catchers on my list at wide receiver. And my question was, and as we planned this out beforehand as well, I was like, which one is going to make the biggest impact? Where you could go with a Desmond Roebuck, who we know what he gave you last year, and you're going to need a whole lot more of that from the freshman All-American. However, I'm going to go with Rashid Williams here as my number 3, because he was someone that it was very clear that Washington wanted to rely on as that number 2 wide receiver last year. Unfortunately, he got hurt and he missed 10, 11 games, whatever it was. I think that he is someone where if he's able to come back and be healthy, there are so many guys that can produce in this wide receiver room. I talked about it on yesterday's show, as the everydayers know, where you're losing almost 2,000 passing yards from Damon Williams last season in terms of guys that left either through graduation, the draft, transfer portal, whatever it might be. And Rashid Williams is one of those guys who we've seen it in spring practice and fall practice as well for a couple of years now, how talented he is and what it is he can bring to the field. Unfortunately, he just hasn't been able to stay out there.
Yep. And that's exactly, he was high on my list, top 5 on my draft board as well.
Oh, the first steal. Let's go.
Yeah. The reason being, like you mentioned, the upside potential that he brings to this offense and what we saw in spring practice in 2025 leading into that, or in that offseason, he was taking the number 1 rep in every drill, the number 1 rep with basically every passing route. And he was making really good plays, great hands. I don't even think I saw him drop a ball in spring practice. But unfortunately, he comes into the season and he's targeted only 7 times in 2025. He only had 13 targets in 2024. So we just haven't seen what he can do during a game. I mean, there's been like little flashes. He had a couple like catches early in the season, but his upside, like his potential, is so critical to this offense when you bring in a couple transfer receivers, but you're expecting Rashid Williams to be the guy we've seen in practice. We just haven't seen it in a game yet.
Absolutely. And that's why I think he's so important, because I was between him and Christian Moss, to be transparent, because it's okay. Yeah. Are you going to get that production from Christian Moss if he wins that X wide receiver position on the outside? And it's that same kind of conversation when it comes to Rashid Williams. We know what this coaching staff wants him to do. We know that was the whole reason that they moved Raiden Weinsbright into the slot, was to have both of those guys on the field, even if it was Raiden playing out of position. So I think that as we head into 2026, if he is able to stay healthy, he's someone who could certainly just emerge as, I don't know if he's got like the 1A kind of upside at wide receiver, but it's just another really interesting cog in how this passing game can play out. But let's switch gears here. Let's get to your number 3.
So my number 3 on my board is defensive tackle transfer DeSean Watts.
Oh yeah, he was actually like he's my next one. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cause you've talked about it a lot. We've all talked about it. Defensive line loses a lot going into 2026. Elenius Davis is the only returner, and he didn't even start every game. He played not every game, but didn't start every game. So you need to have players come into the defensive line room that are ready to be plug and play. And of the 3 that they brought in, I think that DeSean Watts could be that plug and play guy. He's the number 1 run defender last season in the FCS, according to Pro Football Focus. That's significant. Washington's run defense was 3rd in the Big Ten last season. And you lose that type of production on the interior defensive line. You need to have someone come in that's ready to kind of fill the void of Ontario Thompson, Tai Uyunglele, these guys that have left from last season. And I think DeSean Watts can come in and do that. If he plays to that potential that, I think he has, I haven't seen him practice yet, but when we start watching him practice, he's 300 plus pounds. He can be that guy that can fit into that interior defensive line spot and start plugging those run lanes. And I think that's really important to the defensive success on this team next season.
Yeah, I could agree with you more. That's why he was so high on my list too, is because you just are seeing so much turnover. And with a guy like that, who I think that at 6'2", 318, he kind of has the prototypical nose tackle sort of frame, but I think that he's athletic enough to move around and line up in several different places along the defensive line. Because one of my big theories here throughout the offseason has been, we might see Ryan Walters get back to a little bit more of his traditional style of defense with the 5 down bear front, if you will. And I think that he's just one of those guys that offers some versatility, as does Darin Conley, as does Kai McClendon from Mississippi State. And I think that with that trio of guys, if you're able to get just enough, and I'll talk about defensive line a little bit more later on too, I think that this is one of those things where with DeSean Watts in particular, especially if you can unlock him a little bit more as a pass rusher, I think that he's someone who can be a game-changing presence.
Yeah, that's why I'm looking forward to spring practice, just to see like how this staff utilizes those 3 guys they brought in, because there's a lot of voids to fill, and I think they can move them around. I want to see like what's going through their mind in terms of how they want to, place those guys along the defensive front.
Nick, who's your 4th pick?
My 4th pick is running back transfer Jayden Limar. I'm going with a little bit of a theme here of like upside potential, and like if these guys hit, that's going to be what this team needs for success. So I have Jayden Limar because, like I said, sticking with that transfer theme, the run game was in place until December 17th. And then Adam Muhammad entered the transfer portal. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, what's going to happen with this running back game? And they go get Jayden Limar, who's a proven running back. He's played He has a lot of experience, and I think that's one of the big reasons they targeted him. But what stood out to me is that Jedd Fisch at his press conference talked about how he wants Jayden Limar to have I think he said significant impact on this offense. They want to use him a lot, whether it's obviously as a running back, but in the pass game as well as a pass blocker with his physicality. That's going to be tremendously important for how this run game goes into 2026, because now there's a huge question mark, and you don't know, how this run game is going to look potentially without Adam Muhammad, who he played in all 26 games possible to really step into that role as the number one guy. A lot of zone running experience. That run scheme takes time to get used to, get confident in, make decisions in play to kind of hit your run lanes. And I want to see this spring, is Jayden Limar going to be able to, he's a talented running back, but is he going to be able to run zone the way that Adam Muhammad was trending to be able to run zone going into his junior year? Because if they want to rely on him as a running back, getting him out of the transfer portal, we need to see that. And I think that if he can hit that, that's going to be significant for this run game and this offense.
I couldn't agree with you more there. I'm very interested in, I think the number one thing with him, in my opinion at least, is the pass blocking, because that was an element that, especially after Jonah Coleman went down last season, Washington really struggled with. Where I don't think we saw nearly as many plays called where there was a pass protecting running back in there, because it was very clear that Washington just didn't have that trust in anybody to be able to do that. I think that Adam Muhammad certainly would have been better in that regard this year, but I think that was one of the biggest things with Jayden Limar, where whatever his impact does end up being, whether it be running the ball, catching it out of the backfield, pass protecting, that's going to be one of the biggest things, because I look at Jordan Washington, I look at Brian Bonner around him, and the other thing with Jayden Limar that is for me, and we got to talk to him about it when we did have that press conference, where he talked about one of the reasons he came here was he enjoys teaching these young guys and helping them along. And between all of the promising young backs that Washington has in the room, having just a veteran presence like that in there, who, as he said, is like, yeah, it's really nice to be able to learn and teach these things all at the same time, as it helps me learn all of these things.
Yeah, teaching helps learning a lot.
Yeah,
when you're able to teach it at the same time as you're learning it, that really helps. And I think I think that'll speed up his transition to this offense.
Oh, I agree. And I think it's just going to help everybody in the room just continue to elevate, especially as I look at what we could see from Brian Bonner, per se, by the end of the season. I think Jayden Limar is someone who's going to be absolutely critical on that. And we'll get to my next pick on the other side of the break. Right after a message from our good friends over at Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's the stat that says it all. In the time I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. We also got a message from our good friends over at the Space Needle. After 4 p.m., the Space Needle's Pint and Pie gives you the whole package: entry, a savory or sweet tip-top pie, and a pint of beer, wine, or a non-alcoholic drink, all for just $35 per person. Minimum purchase of 2 required. Space Needle is Seattle's most iconic destination, not just for the views, but for evening fun. Rather than trying to cram into a crowded sports bar right before, why not enjoy a little space and a great view while pre-gaming with your favorite cocktail? Toast the home team, then roll into Climate Pledge with the best pre-game story in Seattle. Only $35 per person, limited time offer, 21 plus only, ID required. Get tickets at spaceneedle.com. Minimum 2 required. So, Nick, as we cruise right along here, as we get to our 4th pick, I want to stick along the defensive line. And like I said, I was torn between a couple of guys here. And I think I'm just going to combine them into one and just cheat and say outside linebackers not named Jacob Lane. Because the 2 guys in particular that I want to talk about are Logan George and Darin Colman-Brusa. And as I look at Logan George, this is a guy who Washington was very high on in the transfer portal when he wound up at Ohio State. And then, of course, unfortunately gets injured, only plays 19 snaps there last season, enters the portal again, and winds up at Washington. And I think that this coaching staff is very excited about what they could get from him. And I know for certain, it's very obvious, they feel the same way about Derek Colman-Brusa, where he looks like he's 285 pounds at this point in time. And he is someone, I think Logan George can certainly be in the same mix as well, where if you want those guys to shift inside a little bit more, depending on the look that you want to give, I think that's very, very possible. But that was kind of the secondary point that I wanted to make. I just want to talk about the interior depth, since that was a conversation that we were having. But on top of that, you need someone who can step up and rush the passer. And I think that Washington, with those two guys, combined with Isaiah Ward and Russell Davis and Devin Hyde and Hayden Moore and everyone else that's going to be in that edge rusher room who can just line up at that outside linebacker spot, given what this defense is, that's going to be so critical, because in order for this defense to continue progressing, continue moving forward, you have to find a way to rush the passer.
Yeah, edge presence is going to be crucial this season with a new defensive interior to get that edge pressure to help those interior guys fill their gaps, fill their assignments, let the linebackers come in and fill those run games. If you can get edge pressure like you did last season, that's going to be crucial. And I think, Jacob Lane coming in will help some of those guys adapt to that spot. But that's going to be significant in order to allow that new interior and that front seven that we've been talking about to play to their potential. You got to have that outside pressure.
I couldn't agree with you more here. And so for my last one, I was once again torn, but I'm going to stick along the defensive line because I want to talk specifically about Darin Conley, where this is a guy that when I look at this room, the one thing that we were hoping to see more of from several different guys, where I would single out Ontario Thompson as the one who I wanted to see more of. And over like the back half of the season, as we got into November and into December, he looked great as a pass rushing interior defensive tackle. But we need to see more of that right off the bat from Darin Conley, where you talked about DeSean Watts as someone who can step up and be a gap filler and be one of the best run defenders, as he was last year at the FCS level on this team. I think that Darin Conley can just provide so much from a gap shooting standpoint, whereas 4.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, I want to say it was last season at Ball State. If you're able to find ways to isolate that guy, get him in one-on-one scenarios and just help him collapse the pocket from the interior in one way or another, that just changes so much of how Ryan Walters can operate this defense and how he can change up calls if he knows he has someone that just is going to command so much attention along the interior of the defensive line. And I think it's very clear that when you look at his skill set and his tape versus what Kai McClendon brings to the table and DeSean Watts, it's very clear that this is the guy they want to rely on in that case.
And that feeds into that 5-down defensive front we've been talking about. A lot of the advantage of doing that is creating a hat on a hat. And when you can get these big interior defensive linemen one-on-one with a blocker, that's extremely advantageous, especially against the run, to help middle linebackers fill those run lanes and get to their fits. And that's going to be important when you run those 5-down fronts, to have those guys that can take those one-on-one blocks on the interior because of their physicality, because of their size, like Ryan Walters has talked about so much. Having that physical size in the Big Ten is vastly important, and these guys can bring that size.
Absolutely. So let's get to your last pick, and then let's do one honorable mention each.
Okay, so my last pick, I have cornerback Dylan Robinson.
Oh, perfect.
He was number 7 on my board, so I've kind of come out of the top 5 here, but he's next available.
Wait, actually, no, he's number 7 on my board too.
Are you serious? All right.
Yeah.
Thinking the same here. Cornerback is an interesting spot because last season Washington's pass defense was pretty average within the Big Ten. It ranked 11th in pass defense in 2025, which isn't terrible. Like, that's not a bad thing. But Dylan Robinson came in, started a couple games, and then came in as a reserve just because of the injury situation. He allowed the most yards per reception of any cornerback last season, 13.9 yards per reception on 26 targets. That's not bad. That's just what happened. But what I think we need to see from him is, with the more consistent playing, can he play up a level and kind of reduce that yards per reception average, play like we've seen him in practice. I think he can play to that potential. And if he can do that, that's going to really help shore up this defense from a passing perspective, to kind of increase from that middle tier of the Big Ten to really take a step forward. And I think if Dylan Robinson can play to that potential, that can obviously help this defense.
So I couldn't agree with you more, because this is something I talked about on the show last week, where I talked about Dylan Robinson and how he can unlock this defense and vice versa, how this defense can unlock him.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'm really curious about for anyone who might hear those numbers and panic a little bit and say, wait, hold on, that's a whole lot, is I always like to keep in mind that last year was his first season completely playing cornerback, and he didn't enroll at Washington until June. So that's why I had him in the same exact spot as you, is because the ceiling is so high. And it's very clear that this coaching staff trusts him and really wants to continue to see more out of him this coming season. And that's why they didn't want to go out and reinforce with more bodies from the transfer portal. It's kind of a sink or swim moment for him. And I think that with just how he fits in the defense in terms of the size and the length and the physicality and his ability to defend the run as well off the edge, like we saw Takario Davis and obviously himself do as well this past season. I think all of that is very, very important in just what is next for this Ryan Walters unit, and he's going to be a huge part of that. So, But before we run down our list here, who's your honorable mention?
Well, I could go. I had 20 players on my board, so I could go anywhere. But I'm going to go down. I'm going to go down a little bit, and I'm going to say tight end Decker DeGraff.
Okay.
I think that this is kind of an interesting one because if you go back and look at 2024 and 2025, a tight end was the third most targeted player in this offense both seasons. Kaleki Latu in 24 and DeGraff last season. And I think that that's kind of like a quietly important position. Obviously, it's important in terms of run blocking and then like the passing game and everything a tight end needs to do. But when we talk about a Jedd Fisch offense, you tend to turn your attention to the quarterback, DeMond Williams, the run game, zone run, the offensive line, and then the receiver targets who they, run mesh and all this different stuff with. But when you look at the offense as a whole, I think you need to focus on the tight end position and how important that can be just based on a targets percentage alone. And when they're targeting a tight end, the third most of anyone behind the top two receivers, I think that's important. Decker DeGraff last season, I think can improve. He had 3 drops. He played well, but I think if he can become that real safety blanket for this offense as the tight end and continue to be that highly targeted, second, third, fourth option in the pass game, that's going to be significant for this offense, especially as you have receivers coming in that we talked about a little bit. And potentially, we don't know what the run game is going to look like quite yet. To have a reliable tight end in the passing game and also as a run blocker, pass blocker, that's going to be significant. I think Decker DeGraff is an important piece next season.
So we're definitely just on the same wavelength today because I also went pass catcher for my honorable mention. I went with Jordan Clay. And the reason is the upside, where that's the kind of guy where if he comes in and just blows us away in spring practice, in fall camp, it's very clear that Washington is going to find a way to get him on the field. I wanted to go with one of the freshman receivers here. And the reason I went with Jordan Clay is there's just so much more of an unknown at the X spot right now. And I wouldn't rule out him starting at any point in time because that's just what Jedd Fisch is willing to do. It's what he wants to do. And he is someone who is such a good athlete that he can certainly stretch the field. We know he can win in contested catch scenarios. If he can develop into a better route runner by the time, the season rolls around in September, I think that you've really got something there. And in terms of guys who can establish themselves as a 1A sort of target, like we talked about with Rashid Williams a little bit earlier, I think that he is in that stratosphere of that is someone who can absolutely transcend your offense and take it to another level with what he's able to do at all 3 levels of the field, a lot like Denzel Boston. And with so many targets to go around, I feel like Washington is going to want to find some way to get him involved in the offense.
Yeah, and you can't rule out a freshman starting. I mean, that's just a common theme with Jedd Fisch, and I think that's good. You get that you're recruiting these guys for a reason. You want them to play. And that's why even losing – Washington did lose a handful of receivers, but just the single loss of Denzel Boston, it's like there's guys that are being recruited and that are in this receiver room that are capable of stepping up to that production level. And then Washington ended up losing a few more guys, so you had to go get some of those pieces in the transfer portal. But I think when you look at the freshmen, certainly an opportunity to play. We're going to see in spring practice, what that looks like and what kind of freshmen they want to play. And I think that's definitely a good player to watch going into next season.
Nick, do you want to run through your list real fast?
My final list of 5 was the left tackle position, Kodi Greene. Then I went Hunter Greene with the number 2 pick. A lot of Greens on the roster. I had DeSean Watts at number 3. Jayden Limar was my number 4 pick at running back, sticking with the transfer theme here. And my number 5 was Dylan Robinson at cornerback.
And you had Decker DeGraff as your honorable mention.
And I had
a
Decker
really
DeGraff
solid
as my
list.
honorable mention. Yes. I forgot to mention.
That's a good list you put together there. So for me, I had Demond Williams at 1. I had Zaydrius Rainey-Sale at 2. Rashid Williams at 3, outside linebacker at 4 with Logan George and Colman-Brusa. Then I had Darin Conley at 5, and my honorable mention was Jordan Clay. That was a really fun draft, Nick. We're going to have to do some more of these. I hope the Everydayers liked it. If you did, let us know down below who you think had a better draft. And with that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. If you like what we have to offer here on Locked On Huskies, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.